In 1915, an American ship bearing a cargo of animals bound for Australia was at port in Littleton, New Zealand, when a cage was accidentally knocked. The door sprung open and a pregnant female puma escaped. The big cat fled in the direction of the nearby hills. The tiny portside town didn't have the resources to hunt for the animal, and little was done to track it down. It was believed that the exotic cat would soon perish in the unfamiliar cold temperatures anyway. Over the next century and more, there have been several alleged sightings of large cats in the nearby Canterbury area. The description of these cats has varied wildly, from black panthers to tigers to cheetahs, or even just a very big cat. The sightings have generally been recorded in rural or beach settings. All sightings were usually treated with humor or skepticism. Are you sure you weren't seeing things? Was the sun in your eyes? It was probably just a large feral cat. However, the sightings have persisted across the decades. In 1977, a woman named Frances Clark swore she saw a tiger, and the police took her seriously. Clark was adamant that she knew what a pig looked like and what a dog looked like, and the animal she'd seen was none of these. The police searched the area. It was thought at first that an animal might have escaped from Orana Park, a nearby wildlife reserve, but all their big cats were accounted for. Clark's claim was mocked and she was even called a liar. However, the situation changed dramatically when large animal prints and scat were found at nearby Pines Beach. New Zealand does not have any large wild animals, which made the find even more bizarre. An expert from the wildlife park inspected the prints and declared they most certainly belonged to a big cat, one larger than a lion. Things heated up even more the next day when a farmer near Pines Beach reported that an exceptionally large cat had chased his cows. Another major search was launched without success. Rumors swirled. Police warned that if a big cat had escaped from a zoo or another wildlife park and had been secretly recaptured, they would prosecute everyone involved. The next sighting was further afield, in Mackenzie Country. In 1996, a lone mountain biker reported seeing a panther or puma. The authorities at the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries quickly assured the public that it was nothing more than a large feral cat. Feral cats can be a problem in some areas of New Zealand. Unneutered house cats are dumped or lost in the woods or bushland, and they quickly breed. Any trace of domesticity soon evaporates. Another sighting was made in the Mount Somers area in 2007. This one was more disturbing. The witness heard a commotion and looked into the sheep paddock to see a large wild cat attacking a lamb. Her screams scared the cat away, and no further evidence was found. In 2013, a truck driver was shocked to see a large black cat the size of a Labrador dog feeding on roadkill outside the small township of Fairley. Not long after that, a member of the public took a photo of what appeared to be an abnormally large black cat. The animal was walking across the frozen ice at Lake Clearwater when the photo was taken. The legend continued to grow. The Canterbury big cat sightings, while recorded some distance apart over many decades, had not gone away. A farm worker spotted a large black cat slinking into the bushland at a farm near the Hinds River. Visibly shaken, the woman stated, "I know what I saw. These creatures walk among us." A young farm laborer nearby had his own scary tale to tell. While out possum hunting in bushland, he came across a large black cat. It was in clear view for several seconds before running away. He described it as being the size of a big dog with a round face, pointed ears, and a long tubular tail. As the news of the recent sightings spread further afield, Australian residents had their own big cat story to add to these curious events. Some recalled that in 1940 Mount Gambier was used as a base for U.S. Army groups. One of these groups had a black puma as their mascot. Some said that several black pumas were brought into Australia and into the Army compound to boost morale. It is alleged that the pumas were let loose in the Grampians mountain range when the U.S. Army left. The cats bred and multiplied in numbers, and numerous sightings were subsequently reported in the region. Authorities said there was no truth in this story. But back to the New Zealand mystery. It has yet to be solved, but the rumors linger. Sightings of large cats in the greater area continued sporadically. As the years passed, the descriptions given by shocked witnesses were almost always of a large black cat. What do you think? Under what kind of circumstances can people vanish without a trace? Flannan Isles Lighthouse is on a small island off the west coast of Scotland. It gained notoriety for the mysterious disappearance of its keepers in 1900. The lighthouse was constructed between 1895 and 1899. The construction materials had to be manually hauled up 148-foot cliffs, after being unloaded from supply boats on the sea below. At the time, it took 20 barrels of paraffin a year to keep the light burning. These supplies had to be painstakingly winched up the tower cliffs on cables. The first sign that something wasn't quite right on the island was on 15 December, 1900. The captain of the steamer Arch Tor, traveling from Philadelphia to Leith, made a note in his log that the light was out. Weather conditions were not good at the time, and the light most certainly should have been operational. When the ship arrived in Leith on 18 December 1900, the anomaly was reported to the Northern Lighthouse Board. 3 men were responsible for manning the lighthouse: James Decat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. Aware that there might be something wrong, the relief vessel Hesperus was dispatched to check on the lighthouse and its staff. However, bad weather meant the ship did not reach the island until midday on 26 December. Also on board the Hesperus was a relief keeper, with no way of contacting the lighthouse staff. All eventualities had been considered. One of the 3 men might have fallen ill, or worse. Upon arriving at the island, it was discovered that the flagpole wasn't flying its flag. There were also no provision boxes on the landing dock for restocking. Even stranger, none of the lighthouse keepers were waiting to welcome the boat. Their vantage point in the lighthouse meant they could easily see any ships approaching. The captain of the Hesperus blew the ship's whistle and fired a flare, but was unsuccessful in alerting the men in the lighthouse. A rowboat was launched. The relief keeper climbed aboard and ventured on shore alone. Oddly enough, the entrance gate to the compound and the main door of the lighthouse were both closed. He called out, but received no answer. On entering the lighthouse, he discovered it was empty. The beds were left unmade and the clock had stopped. After returning to the landing dock to alert the rest of the crew, he returned to the lighthouse accompanied by the Hesperus's second mate and another crew member. The men searched the lighthouse again. They found that the lamps had been cleaned and refilled. A set of oilskins was found, which was unusual. The environment was harsh and cold. Why would anyone leave the lighthouse without adequate wet weather gear? However, their search turned up nothing. There was no sign of the missing men. They weren't in the lighthouse or anywhere on the tiny island. The would-be rescuers were shocked, but there was nothing more they could do. For crewmen were left on the island to attend to the lighthouse, and the Hesperus returned to port. The captain sent a solemn telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board. A dreadful accident has happened at the Flannan Isles. The three keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the occasional have disappeared from the island. The clocks were stopped and other signs indicate that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane. The men left on the island continue to search for the missing lighthouse keepers. Although it would be horrible to find a body or bodies, at least it would go some way towards solving the enigma. On the west side of the island was undeniable evidence of damage, probably caused by recent storms. A box at 108 feet above sea level had been broken. Iron railings were twisted, and an enormous rock weighing more than a ton had been overturned. Entire lengths of grass and dirt had been ripped away from the cliff edge. One of the men joked nervously that it looked as if a giant hand had reached down and caused havoc. At the end of December, a superintendent from the Northern Lighthouse Board arrived at the island to lead an official investigation into what might have happened to the men. He was startled by the extent of the damage on the west side of the island, exclaiming it was difficult to believe unless it was actually seen. After looking around, he came to the conclusion that the men had gone to the cliff edge to secure some equipment. While they were there, a large wave must have washed over the cliff and tragically washed the men to their deaths. He added that by leaving the lighthouse light unattended they had breached the Northern Lighthouse Board rules. This probably wasn't any comfort to the lighthouse keepers' grieving families. Two of the missing men had left wives and young children behind. None of the men's bodies were ever found, but the papers at the time had a field day speculating over what might have happened. The public were more than happy to gossip and spin fantasy scenarios. It was suggested that the men had been taken by a sea serpent, or captured by foreign enemies, or even been spirited away by a ship full of ghosts. Over time, a more feasible story developed, and several unusual logbook entries came to light. On 12 December the entry records details of severe winds the likes of which I have never seen before in over 20 years on the island. There are also logbook entries that say one of the men was very quiet, while another had been crying, as the man in question was known to have an aggressive nature and was fond of brawling. The idea of him crying was out of character. Oddly, other entries include comments about the terrible storms and how the men have been praying. But there were no reported storms in the area on those exact days. The men were also experienced lighthouse keepers. They were all very much used to harsh storms. Later, it was stated that the logbook entries were all fictional. However, with the passing of years and with evidence lost, who is to say for sure? Further research has concluded that the men were swept out to sea by huge waves. How this situation came about is purely conjecture at this stage.